It's interesting, and I think there was some people were distressed about it because when you look at the U.S. economy, other corporations don't share their profits like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Many of the native corporations probably would have failed or were rescued by 7i money. Corporations that had few resources, like maybe Bering Straits or some that didn't have timber. They have been carried along by 7i. Yeah. Okay, we have to get to ANILCA in Section 17D2, so maybe you could just...
I played the North Slope role when it came to ANILCA. I filibustered it for, 3 years? And it finally passed when they broke my filibuster, and the only person that joined me in trying to stop it was Strom Thurmond. The only one. And there were some Alaska legislators that were in the gallery, and I need to explain here. You got to look at the overarching history of that decade, and that was that as a result of Rachel Carson's book, the awakening took place nationally in the United States of the environmental problems we had. Now, that's something that was natural to the Native community, the environment. They knew it better than we did. All of a sudden, across the nation, you now have a desire that we have got to get it straight. And so as a result of that, the first issue that came up of national import, you probably wouldn't guess, it's the SST that was to be manufactured by Boeing, but it wasn't a military SST. It was going to be a commercial SST, which is going to be the first major advancement in commercial aviation that wasn't tied to the military. I got really carried away with that. And so Magnuson and Jackson said, oh, we're from Boeing. You know, they used to call Jackson the senator from Boeing. And so here I come along from Alaska, and I'm for the SST because I saw it as an advance away from military dependence. And so we've waged that battle. They pushed me up front. I was on Johnny Carson's show. I was taken to Europe to visit the SST. It was on and on. Lo and behold, we lost. We lost that battle, and that was the first major battle that the environmental community won in the United States. Now, the second issue that came up of a major environmental battle was the pipeline. And I always felt that by getting the amendment that we advanced it. I now have come to believe as a result of ANILCA, because after the pipeline was settled, the next train coming into the station was ANILCA. And on that issue, the environmental community, or what I consider the preservation community, because I consider myself an environmentalist, and I think the Alaska Pipeline was the environmental solution for the United States of America in bringing oil to market. But be it as it may, that's the issue, and that we lost. Now, the deal was cut with the Native community. Their lands could be exploited. The deal was cut with the Southeast Timber people. Oh, they could get $40 million for the road work to go ahead and exploit their timber. And now, the only people that did not cut a deal and were not part of the D2 selection were the rest of Alaska. And that is where the fissures are fractured, and why you have a problem in the culturization between the communities in Alaska, was because of that mistake that was made. And I can recall at the time, I tried to negotiate, because I had my environmental credentials. I was the one that started the whole nuclear critique globally on nuclear proliferation with power generation. And so I was sort of untouchable. In fact, it was very funny. I travel around the country, and people would say, "Oh, that Ted Stevens, you know, he's just so terrible." And of course, it was me. again, that because they didn't want to attack, the environmental community didn't want to attack me because my credentials were so strong, and yet I was opposing ANILCA. I wasn't opposing ANILCA. I was opposing the extreme measures of ANILCA. And there's a difference. I firmly believe that the challenge of human beings is to be able to bring about economic prosperity and accommodating the needs of the environment. And that's, of course, something that, and I just want to say this because the Caucasian community, in dealing with the Indians and dealing with the Alaska Natives, never understood the difference in spiritual value that the natives had with the land. We never understood that. For us, land was economic gain, immediately defined, clear title. That's not the way the natives historically approached land. The land was the collective part of their whole heritage. And so they have a religious tie to the land that we never understood. And that's part of the problem tied in with subsistence and all of that has never been understood or appreciated. Having been negative on that, and like I say, I lost that battle, and it really broke my heart, because I tried to negotiate ANWR and promised the environmental community, if you give us ANWR, we're talking about 1,900,000 acres. If you just give us this slice, we'll give you 10 times more in wilderness, and you can pick it. They wouldn't. They knew they were winning. They had the president. They had the Congress, and there was no way to stop them other than to filibuster them every time at the end of a session. And so Udall and others, and what wrangled me was that in the Senate, the person who waged the battle for ANILCA was a senator from Massachusetts, my home state. And in his state, you had the most polluted harbor in the United States. And I kept saying to him, why the hell don't you pay attention to the environmental problems in your own community rather than just coming up and telling us how to do our issue? But of course, it was a safe issue politically. Well, we can deal with this problem in Alaska and incur the benefit of the environmental community nationally when we run for office. We got shortchanged on that whole issue. And as a result of it, all I was fighting for was to delay it so that we could get more maturity, more adjustment. And as the mayor said, during the land claims issue, I never heard of the issue of subsistence. Never heard of it. It never came up in our discussions. And as a result of it, it never got dealt with. And it could have been dealt with in the ANILCA legislation, but it didn't get dealt with there because, here again, when you see excesses, the pendulum moves over here. And then all of a sudden, these people that are damaged get a bunch of power, and they turn around, and the pendulum goes the other way. The issue of governance is to bring that pendulum to the center where you have modest movements and accommodations, and that's what we did not solve in these very important issues of Alaska, and now they still are there to haunt us. And I don't see, well, enough said.
Just quickly, I want to remind everybody if they would like to write down a question, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, just raise your hand and someone will bring it up here. But I wanted Mayor Ita to kind of follow up on ANILCA. I know it's a huge topic and we're really worrying for time, but...
I think Senator Gravel made a statement about the connection to the native community of land and the spiritual aspects of what we have. And I just want to comment about that, this value of land and this thing that we're going to get money for it. We're totally alien. But what I want to reiterate here is the connection of all natives, not just Inupiaqs, to the land and to, in our case, those of us in the coastal communities, to the sea. That you look at me as a native, as an Inupiaq, you're looking at land, you're looking at ocean. You cannot separate the three. We are the land. We are the sea. And that's a concept that is totally always a challenge for me to try to get across, that to this day that still exists. And while many people have had a bad feeling about what ANCSA offered and what it took away, in the end we probably got as good of a deal as we could have probably gotten given the circumstances. But I just want to put another challenge that's ahead of us, and that's the ocean, the offshore issues. That I've said that if we can do ANCSA for land, is there a similar claim using the same use and occupancy principles to do an ocean claims? And people say, whoa, there's those damn Inupiats again, going at it. While maybe not legally understood, it has the same premise that the users and the occupants have to be dealt with, have to be having a seat at the table. I hear in Washington, D.C., the law of the sea, the Treaty of the Sea is being discussed and going to be settled. And while there may not be legal basis, I certainly say this, that in this day and age, that there is some moral responsibility to address, at the very least, the needs and the concerns of our people. And I look forward to dealing with this on a state level first. And I think that was a part of the...
Yeah, let me speak to this. I was a delegate from the United States Senate to the United Nations on that issue. And let me tell you, Mr. Mayor, if the United States had signed the treaty and joined the law of the sea, you would have a legal vehicle to do what you're talking about, because that was an area that was possible. And the United States has never signed on to it. It's one of the shameful things, because a good part of the leadership was for it. This was the first opportunity that we had to take control, human beings, to take control globally of 2/3 of the planet's surface, which was oceans, and to take control of it for the heritage of all. And with the legal regimes that they had, you could have really approached any one of these areas and said, well, look, we have a moral right, we're here, and so let's recognize that. And here, one of the things that I'm very proud of doing, and I don't know if you recognize, you've all heard of Watson, who is the head of IBM. I became very friendly with the guy who married the sister of Watson, very, very wealthy. And he was very conscious about natives. I got him to put up money to pay for the first Inupiat conference, the circumpolar conference around, so that the Inupiat Indians in Norway, at the time the Soviet Union, and Canada and Alaska could begin to meet. And now they're the ones that for that Arctic area, this is their land and their sea, and it never got... Well, I don't know what you've been doing with your meetings, but that's one of the visions I had.
I'm glad to say it's alive and well.
Great.
And Inuit Circumpolar Council, which is dealing with the Arctic. I'd just like to close with the economics. For a lot of people drove ANCSA and TAPS. Again, economics is likely to drive the issue of the oceans and Alaska. 1/5 of the world's, possibly 1/5 of the world's oil and gas is sitting out there of the area I speak of. And we better get engaged, both not just regionally, but on a statewide basis, and take the lead. I think the model is there. I am not a proponent anymore of just sue. You've got to engage. And all we've ever asked for, and a big part of ANCSA was this. Put how are we involved in all of this? And that is all we have asked for as Iñupiaq Eskimos of the North Slope and of the Northwest. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Senator, because we have relatives from Russia, in Alaska, in Canada, in Greenland. We look at the ocean as all one, the land as all one, and us as one people, because we're all related by blood. And what happens in the Beaufort or the Chukchi is going to affect everybody. What happens in Greenland right now, in the Straits, is likely to affect us. The whales all tie us all together too. So I could go on. I wish we had more time, but I'm just really privileged for this time that I've been given to talk a little bit. Thank you.